You are loved with an everlasting love. That's what the Bible says. And underneath are the everlasting arms. This is your friend Elisabeth Elliot, talking with you this time about an entrance to Auca territory. I began the story in my last talk telling you how I had received an invitation to go to Arauno to stay with a missionary woman, and while there, 2 Quechua men arrived to tell me that there were 2 Auca women at their house. After a 6-hour walk with these 2 men, there I was, face to face with these Auca women. We were staying in a Quechua house made of bamboo and thatched roof. There were lots of flies. Everybody was very edgy. The dogs were barking every now and then in such a way as to make the Indians extremely nervous. They felt sure that the Aucas were surrounding us, sneaking up on us, and might suddenly attack us. At night they would hear twigs break in the forest, and everyone would jump to their feet with guns at the ready. Even in the daytime, when the women went out to plant their manioc, they said they found twigs of manioc broken, which they themselves had not broken. They felt sure that the Aucas had been through their plantations. Dr. Tidmarsh arrived the following afternoon with his tape recorder, and as he held the microphone toward Mancamo, one of the 2 Auca women, she began to talk as if she had some idea what it was. Obviously, she could not possibly have ever seen any such thing. But we were really amazed at their calm, cool way of taking everything that was happening. On the 3rd day, the missionary aviation plane flew over with a phone drop. Nate Saint had invented an ingenious method of lowering a bucket from the plane as the plane circled, and so this pilot was circling the plane overhead. He dropped a phone in the bucket, and we were able to communicate with him. He was asking what was happening, were things all right, was everything going well, and even this seemed to be no surprise to these 2 Auca women. Mancamo began talking excitedly, but as far as I could tell, she was not talking about anything to do with the airplane or the telephone. She would point off into the jungle every now and then, and I thought, I wonder if she's trying to tell us that we better get out of here. I wonder if she's telling us that her people might attack us. But there was no way of knowing. The next day happened to be a feast day for the Quechua Indians, and so they put on feathers and paint. Normally the Quechuas wear blue jeans and T-shirts. The women wear navy blue skirts made of something like denim and checkered blouses. But on this particular day, everybody wanted to get very dressed up, so they put on feathers and paint, and they chanted, and they sang, and they danced, and they played their drums, and they drank chicha. And they gave chicha, which is a fairly mildly intoxicating drink, to the 2 Auca women, who promptly got sick. Apparently they had never had anything intoxicating before. They wanted to paint their faces, too, and put feathers on them, and the 2 women took it very calmly and good-naturedly. By this time, I had decided that probably the best thing for me to do was to stay with these 2 Auca women, not knowing why they had come or whether they wanted to go any further or what to do. I thought probably I should just maintain the position that we had there. But my little daughter was back in Arauno, and I needed more things than I had with me, and so I returned to Arauno and back to my station in Shandia to pack up to go and spend an indefinite period of time in the Oglan. I reviewed the steps that had led to what appeared to be an opening into the Auca tribe. It was the opening that I'd prayed for. I had no idea how it could happen, but here God had done an impossible thing and made 2 women, not men, come out just when I was within reach, and had enabled me to meet them and gain a measure of their confidence. The words of Psalm 118 were help to me as I contemplated what this move was likely to mean. These are the words: I do not fear what man can do unto me. The Lord is on my side to help me. It's better to take refuge in the Lord than to put confidence in man. The Lord is my strength and song. I shall not die, but I shall live, and recount the deeds of the Lord. This is the gate of the Lord. The righteous enter through it. This is the Lord's doing. It is marvelous in our eyes. "The Lord is God, and he has given us light. Thou art my God, and I will give thanks to thee." I had known a very few times in my life when I had not one single prop to lean on, no hint of which course to take, no one from whom to ask advice. But this was one of those times. And in answer to prayer, these words that had been written so long ago under such different conditions came to me with an unshakable assurance that I had to believe they were written for me. They were the voice of God. So I acted on them. And I went back to Arahuno with my daughter Valerie, and from Arahuno again over that long trail that I described in my last talk, with Fermin, a Quechua guide. He carried Valerie in a little wooden chair on his back. It was pouring rain most of the time. He was a good sport. Valerie was a good sport. It took us 8.5 hours, but we got there. We slept in the Quechua Indian house, and the 2 Auca women were still there waiting for us. The next morning, Mintaka and Mancamo, the 2 Auca women, my daughter Valerie and I, were in the river bathing, a cool, clear, warm jungle river. We suddenly heard a scream. A woman came running up from downriver and yelled, "Aucauna Wanchinaushka. The Aucas have killed somebody. Honorio is dead." Honorio was one of the Quechua men who had just gone by us as we were bathing. He was in his canoe with his wife and his dog. He had not gone by more than 10 minutes earlier when we heard the scream, "Honorio is dead. Get out of the river." We got out of the river, the 2 Auca women, talking and yelling and saying things that we couldn't understand a word of, but they too came with us to the house, and in short order they brought the body of Honorio up to the house. There had been 18 spears in him. One of the spears was wrapped with a page from the New Testament, probably torn from the New Testament that belonged to one of the 5 missionaries that they had killed a year and a half before. Another page was from a scrapbook that Mrs. Tidmarsh had made to drop along with the gift drops to the Aucas. There was blood, of course, and I thought of the verse in the Psalms, 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. My daughter Valerie was only 2 years old. She had no idea what was going on. I remember that she put a basin on her head and said, "Hat, Mama." It's strange how, in times of crisis, very small, seemingly trivial details stick in our minds. Then I remember sitting there beside the corpse of Honorio. It was wrapped in a blanket, and his mother was weeping, stroking the blanket with her hand, crying in the Quechua manner, singing a sort of a death wail, telling the history of Honorio's life. His canoe had been found. His wife was gone, apparently kidnapped. His dog was dead. Mancamo was talking to me very excitedly and pointing to my daughter Valerie, a long speech. She was trembling. There were tears in her eyes. She knew, of course, that Honorio had been speared by her own people. Was she telling us that they would do the same to us? We had no way of knowing. When the hunters did not return at sundown, the Quechua women began the death wail again. "They will have been killed," they said. Then one of them turned to me and said, "Manjangichu, senora? Are you afraid?" "Mana," I said. "No." "Kandas apanangaulia," they said. "You too they will carry away." And I thought of those words again. "I know that thou canst do all things, and that no purpose of thine can be thwarted." The page of my Bible had blown open to exactly those words. I didn't take this to mean that God was giving me a guarantee of physical safety, but I did take it to mean that God was going to work his purposes out in his own way. At the same time, I was feeling that I'd really had enough of the Aucas. Quite honestly, I wanted out. Donasco, one of the Quechua men, returned and told us that he had been out hunting and that 6 Aucas, apparently with a boy in the middle, had gone by. He was probably at too great a distance to see that what he thought was a boy was really Honorio's wife, just a slight young girl. The Quichuas began to argue, "Why do you missionaries drop gifts to these people? You really should be dropping bombs. They're killers. They're murderers. They're going to kill us all. Can we stay here and be killed? Shall we leave? Where will we go?" There was a lot of argument. But in my heart there was peace. My destiny was in God's two hands. Finally they decided that the entire village must be evacuated. And so we left. I took Mancamo and Mintaka and Valerie, and we went back to my station in Shandia. When Mancamo and Mintaka got into the airplane, I gestured to them to fasten their seat belts, and can you believe it? They fastened their seat belts. Very strange things were happening to them. Very strange things were happening to me, too. I had never been this way before. But it's a wonderful thing to follow a shepherd who's been over the trail. I'm only a sheep. I don't know where the pastures are, the paths of righteousness, even the valleys of the shadow. But I do know my shepherd, and I trust him.
Gateway to Joy 121, an entrance to Auca territory.